The iron gates of Blackwood University didn't just open, they groaned, like a warning. I should have heard. My name is Sarah. I came here from a small town in Ohio, chasing a dream. My parents, they sacrificed everything to get me into this elite engineering school. I promised them I wouldn't waste a single second on parties. I was here to work. The campus looked like something out of a classic movie. Massive stone buildings, dark ivy crawling up the walls, and a silence that felt heavy. I found the housing office, and they handed me a rusted brass key. Room Sebellingse, Hawthorne Hall. The lady behind the desk didn't look at me. Not once. She just muttered, "Don't lose it. You won't get another." Hawthorne Hall was at the very edge of the campus, tucked away under the shadows of giant oak trees. The air inside smelled of damp wood, and something else, something metallic. I reached the 4th floor. The corridor was long, the lights flickering with a rhythmic shump, buzz, buzz, buzz. Stopped at room 404, but the door, it was already ajar. My heart skipped a beat. Had I been assigned a roommate? The list said single occupancy. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Inside, the room was freezing, cold enough to see my breath. And there, sitting at the desk, was a girl. Her back was to me, her long dark hair covering her shoulders. She was writing furiously. The sound of her pen scratching against the paper was the only thing I could hear. "Hello?" I whispered. She didn't move. "I'm Sarah. I think there's been a mistake. This is my room." The scratching stopped instantly. She turned her head, just enough for me to see a pale, bone-white profile. "There are no mistakes in Hawthorne Hall," she said. Her voice was thin, like wind through dry leaves. "Only arrivals." I stepped back, my hand trembling on my suitcase. "Who are you?" I asked. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were empty. Completely void. "My name is Elena," she whispered. "And you, Sarah? You're late." Suddenly, the heavy wooden door slammed shut behind me. But I was the only one touching the handle. I stood there, frozen. My heart was a hammer, beating against my ribs. Elena, if that was even her name, just sat there staring. "The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice." "I'll go back to the office," I stammered. I reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was like the metal had fused with the frame. "Don't bother," Elena whispered. She hadn't moved an inch, but she felt closer. "They don't hear you once the sun goes down. This building, it eats the sound." I tried to laugh. A dry, pathetic sound. "It's just an old lock. The building is ancient." She finally turned her full face to me. Her skin looked like parchment, thin, translucent. "Is it? Then why are you shaking, Sarah?" I ignored her. I forced myself to move, to unpack. I needed to feel normal, but every time I turned my back, I felt her eyes crawling on my skin, cold, heavy. Night fell like a thick velvet shroud. The campus outside disappeared into a gray fog. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling. Elena was in the bed across from mine, or so I thought. She was so quiet. I couldn't even hear her breathe. Thump. I sat up. It came from the wall, right behind my head. Thump. Thump. It wasn't a mechanical sound. It was rhythmic, like someone or something was hitting the stone with a heavy weight. "Elena?" I called out. "Do you hear that?" Silence. I looked over at her bed. It was empty. The sheets were perfectly flat. No indentation. No warmth. Suddenly, a sob broke the silence. A girl, crying. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall. "Help me," the voice gasped. "It's so dark in here." I jumped out of bed, my skin prickling with pure terror. I ran to the wall and pressed my ear against the cold stone. "Who's there?" I shouted. The crying stopped instantly. Then, a whisper. right against the other side of the brick. You shouldn't have opened the door, Sarah. Now. He knows you're here. I spun around. Elena was standing right behind me. Her face was inches from mine. Who knows? I screamed. Who is he? Elena smiled. And for the first time, I noticed her teeth. They were broken, jagged. The architect, she whispered, and he's lonely. Then, the light bulb above us exploded, showering me in glass. In the sudden darkness, I felt a hand, ice cold, grab my ankle. The cold grip on my ankle felt like metal. I screamed, kicking wildly into the void. Get off me. I roared. The pressure vanished. I scrambled to the corner of the room, fumbling for my phone. The flashlight flickered on, a thin beam of light cutting through the dust. Elena was gone. But the room, it had changed. The wallpaper was peeling back in long, wet strips. And behind the bed, where the crying had come from, there was a door. A small, wooden door that hadn't been there before. It was covered in heavy iron chains, chains that looked fresh. Sarah, a voice hissed. It wasn't Elena. It was deeper, distorted. I should have run. I should have broken the window and jumped. But I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead. I walked toward the chained door. Each step felt like a mile. I reached out, touching the cold iron. The chains fell to the floor. They didn't break. They just unraveled as if they were waiting for me. I pushed the door. It led to a narrow staircase, spiraling down into total darkness. The air coming from below smelled of old books and rot. Is anyone there? I called out. The only answer was a soft, wet thud like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I descended, one step at a time. My flashlight hit a wall at the bottom. It was covered in photos, hundreds of them. I moved closer, my breath hitching in my throat. They were all photos of me. Me at the airport, me walking into the campus, me standing at the housing office. And in every photo, standing just a few feet behind me, was a shadow, a tall, distorted figure with no face. Do you like the collection? I spun around. Elena was standing at the bottom of the stairs, but she wasn't pale anymore. She was bleeding, dark. Thick liquid was oozing from her eyes. He's been waiting for a new subject, she whispered. The last one broke too easily. Who is he? I gasped, my vision blurring with tears. She pointed to a corner of the basement. The light from my phone hit a chair. A man was sitting there. He wore a tweed jacket, like a professor, but where his face should have been, there was only smooth skin, no eyes, no nose, just a mouth, stretched into a horrible, toothless grin. Class is in session. Sarah, he croaked. And then, the basement door above me locked. The faceless man didn't move, but the air around him began to vibrate. A low, humming sound that made my teeth ache. Stay back, I yelled, holding my phone like a weapon. The professor, or whatever that thing was, tilted its head. The skin where his mouth should be, stretched and cracked. Knowledge requires sacrifice, the voice echoed. Not from him, but from the very walls. I looked at Elena. She was leaning against the staircase, watching me with those hollow eyes. He was the best architect this school ever had, she whispered. But he wanted to build something that wasn't made of stone. I backed a ways, my heels hitting a heavy wooden table. I looked down. It was covered in blueprints, but the ink wasn't blue. It was dark red. I saw the layout of Hawthorne Hall, but there was a room marked in the center, a room that shouldn't exist. Room the heart of the building, Elena said, her voice trembling. He trapped us here to keep the walls alive. One soul for every floor. Suddenly, the professor stood up. He was tall, his limbs unnaturally long, like a spider's legs. I turned and ran, deeper into the basement. I scrambled through a forest of old desks and rusted lockers. My flashlight beam danced wildly, hitting something in the corner. A girl. She was huddled on the floor, her clothes torn, her face buried in her hands. "Help me," she sobbed. It was the same voice from the wall, the voice I thought was Elena. "Who are you?" I gasped, reaching out to touch her shoulder. She looked up. Her eyes were wide, terrified, and alive, unlike Elena's. "I'm Arya," she choked out. "I was the roommate. I've been down here for I don't know how long. Don't trust her, Sarah. Elena isn't real." I froze. I looked back toward the stairs. Elena was standing there, smiling. Her body began to flicker, like a dying television screen. "Of course I'm not real, Sarah," Elena laughed. The sound was like glass breaking. "I'm just a memory. But the professor, he is very real." At that moment, a massive, cold hand wrapped around the doorframe behind Arya. The professor had found us. "Run!" Arya screamed. But where could we go? The only exit was behind the monster. The professor's hand closed around Arya's arm. She screamed, a sound of pure agony, as her skin began to turn gray, like stone. "Let her go," I yelled. I grabbed a heavy iron paperweight from a nearby desk and flung it at the monster. It hit his smooth, featureless face. He didn't flinch. He didn't bleed. He just stopped. "The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice." The low humming sound grew louder. The floor beneath my feet started to shift, the floorboards sliding like liquid. The basement was rearranging itself. Walls were rising where there were none, and the stairs, they were vanishing. "He's building your cage, Sarah," Elena's voice echoed from everywhere. She was nothing but a flickering shadow now, a ghost in the machine. "He needs a new foundation, and your fear is the cement." I grabbed Arya's hand. Her arm felt cold, hard, like marble, but I didn't let go. "We have to find room 00, I hissed. "The blueprint, the heart of the building." We ran. The corridor was narrowing, the ceiling dropping lower and lower. It felt like being inside a giant, closing throat. "There," Arya pointed at the end of a taciturn hallway. A single door stood. No number, just a symbol. A single, bleeding eye. The professor was right behind us. I could hear his joints cracking, snap, crack, pop, like dry wood breaking in a storm. I threw my shoulder against the door. It didn't budge. "Help me," I screamed at Arya. Together, we pushed. The door groaned, a sound of ancient metal resisting. Behind us, the professor reached out his long, spindly fingers. He was inches away. I could smell the stench of death and old paper. "Finish IT," the walls roared. The door burst open. We fell inside. The room was filled with mirrors, thousands of them, and in every mirror, I saw a different version of myself. Some were old, some were screaming, and some were already statues. In the center of the room sat a heartbeat, a massive glowing stone heart, pulsing with a dark, rhythmic light. Thump, thump, thump. "The heart of Hawthorne Hall," Arya whispered, her voice fading. I looked at her. Her legs were already stone. She was turning into a monument of terror right before my eyes. "Sarah," she gasped, "break it. Break the heart, or we never leave." I looked around for a weapon, but the professor was already in the room. He wasn't walking anymore. He was gliding, and he was holding a hammer. The professor stood over me, the heavy stone hammer raised high. He didn't have a face, but I could feel his satisfaction. "You were always the best student," the mirrors hissed in unison. I looked at Arya. She was gone. In her place stood a perfect, terrifying, marble statue of a girl frozen in a scream. I was next. I could feel the coldness creeping up my own legs, my skin becoming stiff. I looked at the glowing stone. Heart, thump, 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 thump. It wasn't just a heart. It was a prison. The professor swung the hammer down, but he wasn't aiming for me. He was aiming for the floor. He wanted to shatter the ground, to bury me forever in the foundation. "No," I screamed, with the last bit of strength in my moving arms. I didn't run. I lunged. I grabbed the stone heart with both hands. It was burning hot and freezing cold. All at once, the professor froze. The hammer stayed suspended in midair. If you destroy me, you destroy everything, the walls shrieked. Good, I whispered. I slammed the heart against the corner of the stone pedestal. Cruck! A spiderweb of white light fractured across the stone. The professor let out a sound, a high-pitched frequency that shattered every mirror in the room. The world turned into a whirlwind of glass and shadows. I felt myself falling into an endless, gray void. Sarah, wake up. My eyes snapped open. I was sitting in the housing office. The sun was shining through the window. The air was warm. Here is your key, honey, the lady said. The same lady from before. But this time, she was smiling. Room 201, Hawthorne Hall. It's a lovely room. I took the key. My hands were shaking. I looked down at my wrist. There, under my skin, was a faint, gray, stone-colored mark, in the shape of a fingerprint. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. Walked to Hawthorne Hall. The building looked different, newer, brighter. I reached the second floor, room 201. I put the key in the lock and turned it. The room was beautiful. Sunlight fluttered the floor. There was no Alina, no scratching pen, just peace. I sat on my bed, letting out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for centuries. I made it, I whispered to the empty room. But then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic sound coming from the wall, right behind my head. Thump, thump, thump. And then a whisper, not from a girl, not from a monster. It was my own voice, coming from inside the bricks. Don't let him in, Sarah. I looked at the door. The lock was turning from the outside, but I had the only